All right, this is the level 2 version of the bird dog. Bird dog is a core stability exercise where you have opposite limbs moving at the same time while you're keeping a totally neutral spine. So, as the name implies, core stability exercises are training all of your core musculature to work to keep the spine in a very safe position while you're doing dynamic or athletic movement around that safe position. Just a quick note on core stability exercises, because I don't want to reinforce the idea that your spine should always just be a perfectly neutral straight line, right? We need to move our spine, and in fact, evolutionarily speaking, the spine was the original engine. So if you look at the way that fish move, they have an undulation movement, and it's either side to side like a snake, or it's up and down like a manta ray, right? And that is what drives their movement forward. So the spine is dynamic, does move, and is a huge engine kind of that can drive movement. So we want to be able to flex, bend, twist, rotate, our spine dynamically. But what this is turning into a little bit of a mini lecture, but that's what happens sometimes. I think education is important. So if I'm not carrying any weights, and I'm not carrying anything heavy, and I'm not throwing my body into a position where I could twist a joint or something like that, totally fine. I want my spine to be able to move in all of these different ways. The only load on my spine is the weight of my torso, right? Now let's say I pick up 100 pounds and I set it on my shoulders. All of a sudden, the mechanical structure of the spine needs to be much more, we need to brace the structure of the spine, because now we have a big heavy load on top of it. And in order to brace the structure of the spine, we need the musculature of the core to engage and create a stable buttress, like a stable system of pulleys and levers that keep all of those discs of the spine, the vertebrae of the spine, in a safe position. Because while the spine is a powerful engine that can drive a lot of movement, it is also comprised of these very small, relatively fragile vertebrae with intervertebral discs of fluid, like jelly. So when you start working with heavy loads, or if if you're throwing a really powerful kick that has a bunch of momentum or something like that, while the spine can move dynamically, there are limits to it. So there's a finite amount of rotation that can happen between each of the discs, and a finite amount of lateral flexion. So this is lateral flexion and lateral extension, and this is sagittal flexion and sagittal extension, and this is rotation. So when you start working with a lot of momentum, or you start adding load, you start adding external load, and essentially they're the same thing, side note, because when you increase velocity, you essentially are increasing load. They're different, but the stress on the structure is very similar. In those instances, you do want a more stable, more neutral spine. So that's what we're training. And of course, in daily life, when you're going through your daily movement, enjoy moving your spine. I don't want to create any kind of fear or anxiety around moving the spine. Rather, I want to create awareness and mindfulness around what is the context in which that spinal movement is happening. And often when we see injuries to the spine or to the back, the context is when something is being lifted, or when you're in a weird position. Maybe you have something you're holding onto over your head, and you're like, oh, I need to get this thing over here. And then suddenly something weird happens, right? Anyway, rant over. Bird dog level 2. So, everything is basically the same as level 1. Level 1, Get into your tabletop position, lift the opposite arm and leg, hold for 10 seconds, set the arm and leg on the ground, and then repeat. Now the only thing that's different about level 2 is you do not allow the weight of your limbs ever to rest on the ground in between reps. I'll show you what that looks like. So I lift my right arm and my right leg. Sorry, my right arm and my left leg. I hold for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I lower them and I kind of sweep the floor. So it's less work right now, but my knee is not touching the ground, my hand is not touching the ground, and then I repeat. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lower, sweep, repeat. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lower, etc. Other side, exactly the same thing. You lift that opposite arm and leg. You hold for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You lower. You never let them touch the ground. You do a little sweeping motion if you want. You don't have to. It's not necessary. And then you lift again. And hold for 10. So because you're never allowing the weight of the limbs to ever touch the ground, the core musculature never fully turns off. It is working less when your limbs are lower, but it is still working. It has to stay active. So we've just really increased the amount of endurance that musculature needs to have in order to complete however many sets and reps you have. The number of sets and reps will be defined in your program. If you have any questions about that, hit me up on TrueCoach. And obviously, feel free to fast forward through the rant. Yeah.